Good morning, my friend.
Oh my god. I just realized that the mummy in the story The Mummy was never a mummy. He was just buried alive.
So why would they call it the mummy?
I mean, they can't just call it.
What have we done? We are in serious trouble.
So back in ancient Egypt, there was this priest, Imohotep, that was absolutely in love with the pharaoh's side piece.
Crown jewel of Pharaoh Seti I.
Now, nobody was allowed to touch anck-su-namun except the pharaoh, even though he was married. So one night when she shows up at his place, all the guards go to shut the door, but the pharaoh bursts in before they can lock it. And I bet now they're really regretting checking out her ass first.
Juicy.
The pharaoh questions why Imhotep's guards are there, and we see that it's actually anck-su-namun's place, and that Imhotep just brought an entourage to his booty call.
Maybe she's got a friend.
And this is exactly why you should park at least a block away if you're having an affair.
That car was parked in front.
She's with that bastard again.
But when the pharaoh comes in, she plays everything off like nothing's going on, and stands very casually next to her cat statue. So the pharaoh knows that those are Imhotep's priests, but he still wonders who smeared her body paint. Apparently this no touching rule was very literal. So instead of saying something like, oh, sorry, my arm itched, they just kill the pharaoh.
Well, he may have been a stinky fella, but he had good taste.
They also apparently forgot that he had bodyguards, because they were at least polite enough to wait outside while the pharaoh tried to make his booty call.
Pembroke scholars never wrote about this.
So Imhotep and all his priests jump out the window or something. Anck-su-namun stays behind to take the blame for the murder, and I guess these guards couldn't hear Imhotep screaming or the 7 men leaving because they were behind a sheer curtain. She then stabs herself because Imhotep can bring her back to life. Later on, they steal her body and take her to Hamunaptra, the city of the dead. They almost bring her back, but the pharaoh's bodyguards stop the ritual. As punishment, the priests are mummified alive.
Stick it up your nose, scramble things about a bit, and then rip it all out.
And Imhotep's buried alive. But he's buried with these bugs that never try to escape the container you put him in. And this ritual apparently made him a super powerful immortal, locked in a tomb that these guards will have to watch over for centuries.
Couldn't they have just killed him? It seems kind of stupid to make it so people would have to watch a box forever.
Shut up! The pharaoh didn't want anyone to date his girlfriend, even after she's dead and in hell for his murder.
If we're going to play together, we must learn to share.
We then go 3,000 years in the future, to 1923, where yes, the descendants of the pharaoh's bodyguards are still watching over Hamunaptra, but they have a very hands-off approach. See, there are 2 groups of people trying to kill each other on the site, so the Magi just let them do it.
For over 3,000 years, we have guarded the city of the dead.
The horse guys are attacking the guys in white, and their leader.
Oh, your strength gives me strength.
I mean this guy, Rick O'Connell, and his faithful friend Benny. The horse guys overrun him and chase Rick and corner him. But then they're like, oh fuck, a statue, and just run away. After escaping death, Rick hears whispers coming from the statue. He then gets attacked by sand that makes a creepy face sandcastle. And after seeing all the dudes take off, the Magi are like, looks like we did it, boys. Good job. Let's go home. But then one of them sees Rick and questions if they should kill him. But their leader's like, do you feel like working? Because I don't. This will definitely not come back to bite us in the ass later.
Do they know something we don't?
We then go to Cairo 3 years later, where we meet this book nerd, Evelyn.
I am a librarian.
Despite having a higher education, she has to read out loud like a preschooler.
Take that, Pembroke scholars.
And then, like all nerds, she's very clumsy. Her boss is mad at her and questions why he shouldn't fire her. She answers the rhetorical question with an exposition dump that will surely be useful later.
Because I can read and write ancient Egyptian, and I can decipher hieroglyphics and hieratic.
He tells her to clean up the mess, but before he can even leave the room, she goes into the museum where she finds her brother Jonathan, drunk and desecrating a corpse.
That happens a lot around here.
He's there because he thinks he has an artifact that she can sell for him. Turns out, it's the key to the mummy's tomb that even has a handy map on how to find it.
So the guys who are sworn to keep his location a secret and make sure nobody ever opens him, after burying him, made a map and placed it with the key so that if anybody ever found the key, they'd be able to open him?
Yes.
Idiots.
They show her boss, and because he's a nerd too, he accidentally sets it on fire. Now they only have half a map. And this museum curator is very calm for somebody who just ruined a 3,000-year-old piece of parchment that could lead to the biggest treasure in Egypt. He then tells them that no one's ever found the city. And they're like, no shit. But we just had a map that led to it because people were too stupid to hit a button. And you just set it on fire.
Whoops.
Well, it turns out that Jonathan took it from some guy who's being arrested. So they go to the local jail and find out the guy he took it from was Rick. He tells them that he found the box at Hymenoptera. And they don't question why someone would make a map on how to find a lost city and then leave it in the lost city. Rick tells her that he'll tell her where the city is if she gets him out of being hanged.
What'd he do?
He was just looking for a good time.
Oh, he did something very naughty.
And that's coming from a guy that says he'll let Rick go if she sleeps with him.
Well, that sounds like a good deal.
No, not really. See, he doesn't have a very comfortable bed, and he smells.
Whew. What is that god-awful stench?
So she's willing to give up on her dream of finding the Book of Amun-Ra and the treasure of the richest pharaoh in history instead of taking one for the team.
Well, would you sleep with him for all that?
Let me think.
Yes.
But when she rejects him, he gives the signal to kill Rick, but his neck doesn't break when he drops. He's about to die, so Evie tells him that Rick knows where Hymenoptera is, and that she'll cut him in on the treasure, so the warden orders his release.
Hey, that is a neat trick.
The next day, they meet up at the docks, where Evie's happy that Rick doesn't look like a caveman anymore, but the warden's decided to tag along too, since he doesn't want to get cut out of the deal. That night, Rick finds Jonathan playing cards with some Americans. It seems that they have someone in their group who's been there too. So after they catch up,
Bye, Benny.
Rick notices the footprints of the Magi that were trying to sneak on the boat. But I'm not sure why they thought it was a good idea to board in front of a guy with this many guns. We then go to Evie's room, where she gets attacked by a Magi, who wants the map that he could have easily just picked up off her coffee table, and they could have just assumed that Benny or the Americans took it. But no, Mr. Hookhand had to threaten Rick's love interest, and now the boat is on fire.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
They get away, but Jonathan comes in to check on the gunshots and ends up setting the Magi on fire and spreading the flames. On deck, we see that the Magi are actually doing something for a change, and Rick is terrible at finding people hanging from sides of boats. After he gets away, Jonathan finds the Americans, who are just loving this shootout, but their Egyptologist is not having very much fun. The guy that got set on fire is apparently holding a grudge against Jonathan, but Mr. Henderson takes care of him.
Americans.
And with all the fire and bullets, Jonathan still manages to pickpocket the Magi.
I think not.
Anyway, the boat is now even more on fire, so everyone jumps off. The next day, they go buy some camels, and Evie buys some clothes that make her not look like, well, a librarian. And Rick is like, looking good now that I can see your cleavage, and only half your face. And so they start to ride to Hymenoptera, and ride, and ride, and ride, until night, when the Magi spot them. And this one dude must not only have great night vision, but telescopic vision too, because he recognizes O'Connell, who he hasn't seen in 3 years, from super far away.
I'm your biggest fan.
At dawn, both teams meet up at the same spot, and they're like, oh shit, we have a bet on who gets there first. And they take off as soon as the sun reveals a mountain that they couldn't see before.
So it was too dark to see?
No, they act like you can only find the city when the sun hits it at dawn, but we know from earlier that you can find it without the sunrise, or even at night. So I'm not sure what all this mystic mirage bullshit's all about. But everyone is in awe of this, except Rick, who acts like he's so cool because he's already seen it.
Here we go again.
But anyway, they're all racing to get there first to win $500, even though they're about to discover a fortune worth billions. And they even fight about it on the way there. But Evie and Rick get there first, and nobody gives a shit. They set up their camp away from the entrance to the tomb, and the other team thinks they're idiots. But the only idiot is Rick, who forgets how to talk to girls when he feels stupid and useless for once.
For when you're down. Yeah.
They've decided to go into a hole at the base of the statue those other guys were afraid of, because they're trying to find a book before the other team.
Why would they want a book instead of treasure?
I am a librarian.
And the fact that they say that it's made out of pure gold makes no never mind to you.
In the hole, they seem to have figured out the lighting system from the surface on the very first try. And none of the mirrors that were underground for 3,000 years had any sand or dust build up on them.
Please.
Evie realizes that they're in the mummy prep station, so Rick pulls out his gun to scare off ghosts or something. They get to the base of the statue, but they start hearing the creepy whispering again. Turns out it was just the Americans, and the 11 other mute people they trust to help them with jump scares. Benny tells the team that got there first that this is their site, but then Evie notices a hole in the floor, which means that there might be a room underneath this one. Or it could just be a fucking hole. So Evie was right, and it wasn't just a hole. So their new plan is to dig up into the room they were just in and take the stuff anyway.
Couldn't they just work together?
Well, you'd think. I mean, there's going to be enough treasure to go around, especially for people who get excited about $500. But while they're digging, they seem to lose the warden. See, he snuck off to find his own treasure, but ends up finding some of those stay-in-your-canister bugs.
You mean bugs? I hate bugs!
The Americans are trying to break into the statue base, but the Egyptologists suggest to Mr. Henderson that maybe someone without a name in the story open it. And he's like, that's not a bad idea. And 3 guys go to open it and get sprayed with acid and die.
Good chaps, every one of them, too.
We then find out that Jonathan is one of those annoying people who practice their golf swings at weird times and locations. But this douchebaggery is what leads them to find the mummy's tomb. Evie determines that this coffin belongs to somebody either super rich or a total dick.
Well, it's not like it's going to be Tim from 7-Eleven.
So when the warden's out collecting what he thinks are statues of container bugs, one of them breaks out of its gold wrapper and gets agoraphobic and has to find a new container to hide in. And this new container is the warden.
I hate bugs.
So after Evie reads that the coffin belongs to Voldemort,
He that shall not be named.
Jonathan enlightens us that he doesn't know that coffins are for dead people.
Well, whoever's in here sure wasn't getting out.
The warden runs in screaming and knocks himself out. So now they stop looking for the thing that they were like 2.2 seconds away from finding. Later that night, the Magi ride in and warn them to leave by killing them. I mean, obviously not all of them, just nameless local people, not like anybody we've been introduced to. Jonathan forgets that he has a gun and runs to Rick for help.
How did he forget?
Beats me. I mean, he just found the liquor before they showed up. Plus, he literally just killed at least one dude before this one came riding towards him. So O'Connell saves him and then threatens to blow everyone up if they don't leave. And they do. The dudes that are sworn to make sure Imohotep does not escape just leave and give them another day to hang out after they already let them dig for a full day already. I mean, they could have at least warned them not to open the sarcophagus.
Well, how was he going to blow him up?
With some dynamite that someone just left beside a fire. But he defuses that, shoves it down his pants, and goes to check on Evie. So the next morning, the Americans finally pull out the box they found because I guess they stopped looking for their treasure when their guys died too.
Have you no respect for the dead?
It's not like getting some sleep is going to make those people not dead. They then do a few horror story no-nos. 1, they read ancient text in that language out loud. 2, they keep going after weird shit happens that make locals run away. And 3, they don't pay attention to warning labels and still open the chest.
Death will come on swift wings to whomsoever opens this chest.
Well, you didn't come all this way for nothing.
And at the same time, the main characters are opening Imhotep's tomb. They see that he was buried alive, with no light and a shit ton of scarabs eating him. But he was still able to write a message. The Americans find the book that Evie's looking for, and also stumble across the pots that held Imhotep's organs, which they think will be more valuable than the book. That night, Evie steals the book from the Egyptologist, and realizes it's not the book she was looking for, but the Book of the Dead. And then, she reads from it out loud, like a preschooler, because we've already established that she does that.
No harm ever came from reading a book.
Well, since it brings Imhotep back to life, I'd say that comment's bullshit.
Funny, the damage a silly little book can do, especially in the hands of a silly little girl.
And since Rick asked her what it said, she stupidly read it in the language he didn't speak. So all of this could have been avoided if she just had some common courtesy. Just remember, if you ever come across an ancient language, translate it in your head or on a piece of paper, and then just say what it means in a normal language. The mummy comes back to life and is still screaming from his painful death. And this brings a shit ton of locusts to camp. So the Americans run inside the temple where the scream just came from after reading the Book of the Dead to essentially get away from some really big grasshoppers.
I hate bugs.
Mr. Burns trips and loses his very thin glasses, but now he can't see an inch in front of his face. Benny then steps on him and refuses to help Mr. Burns because of all the bugs that aren't chasing him. He even takes his torch to make him even more blinder. But then we see that the glasses are just cracked, but Mr. Burns would rather not see and bump around the ancient temple like Velma from Scooby-Doo. But that doesn't last long since he gets attacked by something. Rick, Evie, and Jonathan are also in the temple, and a bunch of scarabs come after them. Rick throws his torch at the wall and then starts shooting at them. Jonathan has the idea to jump to a platform, and the others follow, but the bugs don't even try to go after him. Evie manages to find a secret door, and now the guys have to try to find her. So Rick and Jonathan are trying to figure out the trapdoor, but Henderson and Daniels come running in screaming that the bugs are coming back. So the guys jump off the platform where they know they're safe, run with them, but then immediately stop to watch some nameless guy get eaten.
And is that my problem?
Evie comes across Mr. Burns, who had his eyes and tongue removed. Apparently she interrupted Imhotep's organ harvest. The mummy goes after her, and she begs the guy with no eyes to save her. But it's okay, because when he gets a closer look at Evie, he thinks it's his girlfriend.
Do they look alike?
Not even close. But he did just take eyes from a blind guy. But he's trying to seduce her anyway. Rick finds her, which pisses Imhotep off. So Rick shoots him, and everyone runs away. But when they get outside, they run into the Magi, who are like, "We did the bare minimum to prevent this from happening. And look what you did." They also have Mr. Burns with them, meaning that they went into the room and grabbed him, leaving the poor defenseless woman to be killed.
Please don't leave me.
The Magi know that he's going to kill the Americans to return to his mortal form. So instead of getting them out of there and as far away as possible, they're like, "All right, well, we're going to go, but we'll let you know if we can find anything that can kill him."
We've sworn at manhood to do any and all in our power to stop the High Priest Imhotep from being reborn into this world.
At some point, Benny must have gotten separated from the group because he's now being attacked very slowly by Imhotep. But because he's a man of culture, he's spared because he knows the language of the people that the pharaoh used to use as slaves. And Benny is totally on board with being his bitch, especially when the mummy pulls a bunch of gold from, I'm guessing, his ass? So all he has to do is help him find the other organ jars, and he can have all the butt gold he wants. The next day, back in Cairo, Rick wants to run, but Evie wants to stay and fight. He goes down to the bar to meet Jonathan, but bumps into a World War I pilot who wishes that he died in battle, and I'm sure that won't come back at all. But Jonathan is at the bar, calling the Americans pussies for running away from the mummy that's trying to kill them, while Mr. Burns is upstairs with Benny and Imhotep. Benny has gone through the trouble of making up some lie about Imhotep being a prince who wants to meet with him, and then he immediately tells him he's the mummy. And I really don't know why they bothered making coffee if they were just going to kill him. But killing Burns makes all the liquor go bad, since all the water turns to blood. But this makes them think that Imhotep is here, and if that doesn't, then the meteor shower, which is not a plague of Egypt, makes them a little bit more suspicious. But Rick and Evie see Benny running and hear a scream upstairs, so now they're definitely sure. And they go to find Burns dead and the mummy getting stronger. Rick and the Americans are shooting at Imhotep, but he stops to hit on Evie. He's then scared by a cat, and he escapes by running towards it.
Did I miss something?
But they need to figure out how to kill Imhotep, not just scare him. So they look for some answers at the museum. But when they get there, the curator's talking to the Magi with really good vision. They determine that Evie is his choice for a human sacrifice to bring anck-su-namun back from the dead, even though he didn't need one before.
Oh well, guess she's not so lost.
Imhotep then goes back to his plagues and tries out darkness. The Egyptologist is heading home, and Imhotep is right behind him, but he doesn't get him because he likes to play with his food. Rick and Jonathan show up to his apartment where Benny's looking for the book, but he gets away when they hear a woman scream. Actually, it was the Egyptologist screaming, and he must have thrown his voice as he was dying because they hear the scream coming from one side of the building, and Benny runs the other way, but when they go to check on Benny, that's where they see Imhotep standing over the Egyptologist's body. Imhotep now has the book and 2 jars.
That's 2 down, 2 to go.
Then he'll be coming after Evie.
He then unhinges his jaw and vomits out a bunch of flies.
I hate bugs.
Back at the fort, Daniels goes down to the bar, and Henderson stays behind to guard Evie. He thinks he hears something outside and checks the window, but Imhotep waits until he drops his guard, since he's invincible, and then he attacks him as sand so he won't get shot. He then sneaks into Evie's room as sand, but then kisses her awake, which must be really gross since part of his face is missing, and he just ate a bug. But then the guys come in with a cat, so he freaks out and leaves.
This isn't what you're afraid of, is it? The cat?
They go back to the museum and figure out that if the black book brought him to life, the gold book might be able to kill him. But then they hear a crowd of people chanting and coming towards the building. Maybe taking a convertible there was a bad idea. They discover that the gold book is also at Hamunaptra, under a different statue. So now they conveniently need to go back to the place where Imhotep needs to take her to resurrect his girlfriend. They sneak out and get to their car, but Benny shouts for Imhotep, and he calls for his followers, and now he is fully committed to that stupid looking big mouth thing. So the crowd sets up a roadblock, which they just run over, but eventually they get a hold of Daniels, who somehow didn't smash his organ pot after being pulled out of a moving car. So Imohotep gets him, and then goes after Evie, who's cornered on the street now. He walks up and says that he'll let everyone live if she goes with him. She agrees.
Thank you.
But then he orders his followers to kill them. But as luck would have it, there's a sewer right underneath them, and Rick, Jonathan, and the Magi escape while the curator fights off the crowd. That morning, they roll up to the Air Force base guarded by children, in the car they crashed last night, and ask the drunk vet to fly them to Hamunaptra. So they travel by plane, while Imhotep, Evie, and Benny travel by tornado. Well, since Imhotep knows they're close, he stops before they get to the city, and he makes a wall of sand to attack them. And since he wants Rick to know it's him making it, he puts his face on it, and tries to eat the plane. So Rick shoots the sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Well, Evie's worried that the bullets won't work, so she kisses Imhotep to distract him, but the plane goes down anyway. It kills Winston, but the two guys that were strapped to the wings of the plane are just peachy. Winston also crashed in slow-reacting quicksand that only had the diameter of a little bit bigger than the plane.
You have got to be joking!
Imhotep gets to the room where they're going to perform the ritual, where we see that Benny is threatening Evie with a gun, and clearly doesn't know how human sacrifices work. While the Magi and Rick dig, Jonathan shows no urgency to save his sister, and makes the same treasure hunting mistake the warden did. But this time, Rick is there to cut the bug out. But when he shoots the bug, it signals Imhotep of their presence, and he brings back some of his priests who are mummified, but also turned into graffiti. The good guys come to a dark room, and O'Connell's like, I know this trick, and he shoots a mirror, and it hits exactly just right to align all the other mirrors in the room to create light. And this also happens to be a gigantic treasure room that they would have found if they would have just looked around the first time they were there, instead of fighting over the first dig site they came across. Mummies just start popping up everywhere.
They do.
Because who wouldn't bury all these priests in the treasure room? They start shooting them, but not before the Magi confirms that these are in fact Imhotep's priests.
Who the hell are these guys? Imhotep's priests. All right then.
Not just some random mummified priest coming to say hi.
Hello there.
During their escape, they just happen to find the statue they're looking for, and then blow up the only door to that room they know about. We see that Benny's found the treasure room too, and has started taking gold that hasn't been up a mummy's ass. At least I think. The priests are now coming through another entrance, and it's a good thing this statue doesn't have any acid booby traps, or they'd be in big trouble. They get the book, but it needs a key too. The Magi sacrifices himself and holds the priest back, as Rick blows a hole in the wall so they can escape. They come to find Imhotep performing the ritual, and it's working. Anck-su-namun's soul is back in her body, and all he has to do is stab Evie, and she'll be human again, and he'll be immortal. But Jonathan runs in, and Imhotep stops what he's doing so he can get the book from him.
Why would he do that?
Well, the book could kill him.
Not if he becomes immortal. Plus, he has the key that they need to open it. He's not in any danger.
Shut up. It's better to be safe than sorry. Plus, Evie's not going anywhere. She's chained up. So he goes after Jonathan, but then Rick comes in and cuts Evie loose.
See?
Jonathan sees an inscription, and he doesn't know what it says, so he just reads it out loud. But this releases an army of the undead, and they start going after Rick and Evie. She tells Jonathan that if he finishes reading, he can control them, but he doesn't know the language, so him reading the first part was solely just to cram some more action into the ending. Anyway, Mummy and anck-su-namun goes after Evie, because I guess it doesn't matter who kills her, but I'm willing to bet that the soldiers would do a better job than the Pharaoh's hooker.
Why, Joe, do you really think so?
But for now, they're on Imhotep's side, and you can tell because they do that stupid big mouth thing too. Evie tries to help Jonathan read the book, and instead of running over to him and getting it to read herself, she just helps him read the hieroglyphics. And he reads it just at the right time, and then orders them to kill anck-su-namun, even though she's already dead, and they could just do the ritual again. So Imhotep goes after Jonathan to get the book, but O'Connell goes after him. And since Jonathan was able to pickpocket someone that was on fire and didn't come within 5 feet of him, getting the key from Imhotep while he's being strangled is easy.
That's called stealing, you know.
Imhotep throws Rick across the room, and apparently is so mad at him that he ignores the people looking for the spell that can kill him as he walks right past them.
They're led by a woman. What does a woman know?
He strangles Rick, but remember, he's got a really strong neck.
His neck did not break!
So Imhotep's gonna eat his head using his stupid big mouth.
That bad, huh?
But they find the right spell, and a ghost chariot comes to take Imhotep's soul away. Pissed off, he stupidly walks right into Rick's sword and is like, ah shit, that really hurt. He then stumbles into a black pool with really weird faces in it, and dies. And if that wasn't enough, Benny's still bringing out regular type gold, but got tired and rested his bag on the temple's self-destruct lever. So now everyone has to run out. But since time is of the essence, everyone wants to stop to get something. But Benny gets stuck in the treasure room, and somehow the hole on the roof goes missing. A bunch of scarabs come in just as his torch goes out, so he dies.
Goodbye, Benny.
The city's collapsing, but the good guys get out just in time. We also see that the Magi made it out too, which probably means that he just set the last part out, because why wouldn't somebody with a sworn duty to do something for centuries help to make sure everything turns out all right? But after seeing that they won, he just takes off. So Rick and Evie share the same camel to take them back on a days-long trek, and wouldn't you know it, out of all the camels he could have picked, Rick picks the one that Benny loaded with gold.
I know my treasure.
Hey, Benny! Looks to me like
you forgot to hit the subscribe button.
Get loose!
I'll be seeing you again.